A video Q&A session for the Rising Crane Online Academy, and we'll be doing these every week. So if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Facebook group, and I'll break them down and address them on a video for you. In addition, of course, tomorrow night we have the Zoom class where I can watch your movements and make some corrections if you want. So hope to see you there. Okay, first question was from Carl. He was asking about the punch number 7. So I'm going to do a much more detailed video and breakdown of this. I'm going to put it on the Academy tomorrow. Okay, but I'll just give you some basic introduction to the movement. Xin choi. Xin in Cantonese means to slip or to slide. So if your foot slips, it's xin. That's the word xin. So sliding along. So it's a punch that slides along something. So in the traditional form, the forearm is close to the ribs. So when you're punching, then you're rotating. You're creating this kind of a motion. So for example, in some martial art like Wing Chun, they call Bong Sao, or in Hong Kong, Kwan Sao, like this. But Hup Kun had the idea of something's coming in towards you, you're slipping and you're striking. So it's usually aimed at the lower ribs, the floating ribs. So you can be, if you're fighting and you're coming around the person's arm and you're sliding along their arm, hitting into the ribs. Or if someone's throwing a punch and you're defending with your forearm, and then you're hitting with the same motion. That's called Xin choi. So we're going to use the 2 large knuckles, but with the pinky pointing upwards for this motion. So you have this deflection, this kind of a motion, right? So the Zhou Yao Ling Gong, the basic training exercise where we use the turning horse. So you need to understand this is a training method, so we train both sides equally, okay? In application, Xin choi is used when you're flanking your opponent. So example is if I'm in a southpaw stance, he's in an orthodox stance, I can slip to the outside and I can slide in with a body punch. So generally in an orthodox kind of position, if I try and drop a body punch, I leave my head vulnerable to a counter. That's why you generally don't see low right crosses. You may see a level change in a punch, but generally you don't see a low cross like this. Whereas in the Hup Kun, we're trying to get to the side and slipping either inside or outside of the opponent's arm. So we have some paired exercises and drills for teaching you how to do that. But just get the idea of sliding. So basic training exercise, if I throw the right and I'm using my chair ma and I'm running along and then I'm turning it over, I'm aiming it to the 45 degrees so I can practice this to both sides, slipping, slipping. So it's teaching you this rotation and this over the top motion. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's the basic idea of Xin choi. Next question, just going to check my notes. Stefan was talking about the backhand, how passive and how active the backhand is. That's a great question, Stefan, and it depends on which technique it is. It also depends how you're practicing it. Look, traditional Hup Kun, the Goideng Pao Choi, which is the first hand movement, is really a great exercise for opening the shoulder, strengthening the whole shoulder girdle, and developing that rotational force, okay? And traditionally it was done with weights. So these are the weights that it was done with, okay, called Seki Pai. So when I throw the weight over my head and then I catch it, so catching it is I'm kind of tensing, I'm going into my shoulder, I'm kind of anti-shrugging my shoulder here, but at the same time, there's no sense of pressing. I want to try to find the position where the whole thing is stable. So this comes down, turn, this throws up. This comes down, turn, this throws up. So you can see, when you see some people performing it and they really have this hand very high, like in modern wushu, this doesn't make sense. If these were heavy weights, you don't throw the weight out. This one drops, this one lifts. So the backhand is this. Look at my thumb. That's the feeling. As it comes down, the thumb rotates. And that also loads for they call Sunjunlik, the rotational force. So I have this potential for this rotational force. So I don't throw the hand up, but I open it. Okay? With the second movement, it's different. With the second movement, there's a much more active pull. This hand's pulling down. So, this is a bit like a kind of a kettlebell swing where you're trying to create a feeling of floating at the top. So you're projecting through. Now, in order to do that, you do actively pull the rear hand. So the back hand is the same height as the front hand. So when you see it done with weights, you will see this I'll do it sideways so you can see. You'll see this kind of a float at the top. Float at the top. Okay, that's the kinetic chain sending the energy through into the weight rather than the arm pulling the weight up. So if you see this, this is bad. This is a deltoid exercise or something. But when you do the pocket correctly, the force comes from the ground through and the arms just transmit it. So yes, you actively pull the rear hand. So the two techniques are different. So hope that makes some sense of it. Jek Chung Choi, backhand, is also very active. I'm thinking of elbow. When I elbow, I get much more of a rotation. Of course, in real fighting, maybe you don't necessarily have to bring the hand all the way back, but what you're learning to do is connect the two sides from fist to elbow. Okay? I can go on with all of the techniques, but you kind of see the idea. They're all slightly different. Okay, next question. Kelly has a Tai Chi question. Yeah, the difference between Peng and Liet, because they do look similar. If you look at a picture in a book and you see, for example, part horse's mane is kind of here, and then you see ward off, and it's pretty well, from a picture, it's pretty well similar. I am going to be filming applications. Obviously, we're in lockdown, so I'm solo here. I can't really make very good application videos yet. Okay, bear with me. There's going to be loads coming because I'm going to cover all the movements that we've learned. But I'll just give you some concepts, some ideas to give you a feeling for the movement, right? Liet force is going sideways. Peng force is going upwards. So let's take a example in fighting where I'm wrestling with my opponent. I have his arm. I've dragged it across my body. I've stepped in deep behind his foot, and now I'm throwing him over my leg. So this is they call it splitting, Liet, splitting force, which is this kind of tearing, this kind of opposite direction. So you're pulling this arm down and tearing this one, and that will cause someone to lose their balance. Their energy is on the outside of the forearm. Okay, so that's a takedown application. There are others. There are many, but that's one, probably the most common. Peng by itself is not an application. It is something you need to do before you do an application. So, for example, if my opponent's arm is on top of my arm and I want to do a technique, let's say, for example, he's coming in strong and I'm trying to, for example, turn and throw him down. So if someone's coming in, I'm throwing them down, right? You can see the principle of borrowing somebody's force. The harder they come in, the harder they fall, right? That's a theory. In practice, though, if someone comes at you like a freight train and you collapse and you end up in a puddle, right? So you need to initially, there is an initial kind of so they translate it as ward off, but it's, how do you translate? You know, like on a boat, you have those kind of floats around the outside like a pontoon. So when it hits something, it creates that kind of a force, that kind of buffer, right? So when something's coming in at me or putting pressure on me, I need initially some kind of buffer to stop it collapsing. Once I have connected with the force and I've connected it down to the ground, then I can rotate, then I can throw, then I can lift. So imagine opponent's hands coming here, I need to first of all connect and lift it. And I need to create the energy connection through, because if that collapses, I'm down. Once I have that, then I can arm drag, or I can pluck down, or I can swim through. But you need to have that first. So Peng is like the basis for all the other energies. If you have a ball and you're putting pressure on it and it spins around, that's called rollback, Lu. Okay, so that's the next movement in the beginner sequence. So we have Peng, we have Lu. But think of it this way, before the ball can turn, it has to be inflated. Because if you have a ball that's just flat, you push it, it will just go. Whereas if it's inflated and you push it, it can turn. So the inflation is the Peng. This is Peng. Opponent's arm is on top of mine. Peng. Then Lu, Ji, whatever's the fighting application. So you can kind of see that. It's a kind of a prerequisite for the other energies. Again, I'll do more detail and we'll do prepared applications as soon as I have someone to film with, which should hopefully not be too long. So that's a quick Q&A. I think that's all the questions that have come through so far. Keep sending them to me. I'll do one every week, and lots more to come. See you in the academy. See you on Zoom tomorrow night. Thanks, everyone.